It was April 5th, Sunday. It was Easter. And Brian Hooker is flagging down this overnight security guard at a boatyard on Marsh Harbor in the Bahamas. And he's saying, help me, help me. I washed up on shore. And he said, my wife bounced off the back of the dinghy that I was on yesterday around 7:30 p.m. It was terrible weather. The waves were 2 to 4 feet high. The wind was blowing. She was driving, and she bounced off the back, and she took with her the dry bag with the extra key to the dinghy, and she had a hold of the lanyard with the key that was in the engine to this electric motor, and off she went. And there I was in the dinghy, inoperable. I had no motor, and she's getting separated from me. And then I drifted for 9 hours, 4 miles, and landed here on your shore, and then walked through all this thicket to find you to get help. That was around 4 o'clock in the morning.
Brian Hooker told investigators his wife bounced off the back of a dinghy in 2 to 4 foot waves. There's only one problem. The water in that photograph looks like glass. I'm going to walk you through the case of Lynette Hooker, a woman who vanished off the coast of the Bahamas, and the husband who says the ocean took her, while the evidence, allegedly, says something very different. This is a federal murder investigation with no body, no arrest, and a suspect currently living at his mother's house in Sacramento.
While you're frustrated, as I'm frustrated, I do have a little treat for you. And that is, we finally got the first image of Brian Hooker since he bounced himself out of the Bahamas and landed in the cozy confines of his mom's house in Sacramento. Feast your eyes. There he is. There's the guy who promised us all, I will never leave the Bahamas until I find my wife. It's going to take a higher power to get me out. Oh, no. It took an airplane the next day. And that's where he is, at Mommy's. Yeah. So what we understand is that he smokes weed outside, outside the house a couple times a day, walks the dogs. He does get on a plane every so often. He's been in Michigan, spotted by our spies, where he used to live and where his daughter lives. He's also been up in Oregon, where his brother lives. But he spends most of his time at his mommy's house. I wonder if he thinks he's free and clear. There he is, walking the dogs. Does he look like he's comfy? Any conscience there? He's not charged with anything yet. But Sacramento. First picture. This is where the higher order took him from the Bahamas. I'm going to go over a lot of this in a hot minute, and then I've got somebody who is going to explain to you in even a better way, because, me.
And by the time we're done, you're going to understand exactly why. Let's set the scene. April 4th. Lynette and Brian Hooker are aboard their sailboat, living the liveaboard life in the Sea of Abaco. They go ashore for drinks, reportedly a few rum cocktails each. Then, sometime that evening, they climb into their small dinghy to head back to the boat. Brian says the weather turned violent, high waves, howling wind, and that Lynette was thrown from the boat while she was driving. He says he drifted, powerless, for 9 hours before washing ashore at 4 in the morning, miles from where he started. Here's the detail nobody can explain away. Photographs taken that same evening, in that same stretch of water, show it calm, flat, reflective. Another dinghy was recorded leaving the area around the same time, moving through the same conditions without incident. If the water was that dangerous, why does every photo from that night look like a postcard?
And I wonder why he told that story. Because, didn't he think somebody was going to check the weather from the night before? Or maybe somebody had a photograph or maybe a video of the water showing that it was dead calm. It was lovely. It was a lovely evening. Because we did. Yeah, we did. We got a picture of Soulmate, their sailboat where they were living aboard, right? They were on their way back to Soulmate, their yacht that was anchored at Aunt Pat's Bay from the Abaco Inn where they'd been having cocktails. And he had that story. But we saw Soulmate at that time. A photograph. Calm water. We also have video of another dinghy that's leaving just about a quarter mile away from there with the same water conditions and wind conditions. And they're calmly going out. It's literally like a reflecting pool. And they're calmly going out in their dinghy at the same time. So sorry, Brian. baloney on the wind and the waves.
That's the hook fact. Hold on to it, because it's the thread that unravels everything else. Now, if you're a state prosecutor, this case moves fast. An arrest can happen while investigators continue building the rest of the evidence. But this crime allegedly happened in another country's waters.
And I will say that because it's a murder investigation, not because he's charged with it. He's not. In fact, he's not charged with anything, but the murder investigation that's ongoing in the Bahamas, spearheaded by the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service, that is still at full throttle, my friends. So the reason that he's not charged yet is because the federal government does things differently. This is a federal crime that's being investigated, right? It happened overseas. It's being investigated by the Coast Guard. It's federal jurisdiction. It's not a state crime. Like, it didn't happen in Florida.
Which means it falls under federal jurisdiction, and federal prosecutors work differently. They typically build much more of their case before filing charges. That's the frustrating part for anyone following along. It's also, allegedly, the reason Brian Hooker is still a free man.
Didn't gather enough evidence in that short period of time, which was the only legal window they could hold him before they had to charge him. They felt like they didn't have enough evidence to charge him, so they had to release him. And he came out, and the next morning he sat for 3 TV networks because he thinks that's where you get maximum coverage. Yeah, it wouldn't sit with me. His lawyer, no. She said, sorry, we're not available. Just the 3 TV networks.
But free is doing a lot of work in that sentence, because while the public waits, investigators reportedly do not.
They were down there for about an hour. And guess what I know from my sources? She was dead on that boat. She was dead on that boat. Entirely possible she was in that boat while that police officer was down there with Brian Hooker. We know she was dead on board that boat, and we know she was dead before 8 o'clock at night, the night before. So this whole no float, she didn't bounce off. She and Brian made it back to soulmate. 100%. And she was dead on soulmate. My sources say the evidence will prove that. So if you're the state, like if it was a state case, he'd be arrested like that. But again, it's a federal case.
Let's talk about what doesn't add up. And there's a lot. Brian told a boatyard security guard that Lynette grabbed a dry bag.
Well, off you go, right? Where is this action where she can grab her dry bag from down in the footwell and somehow grab the lanyard that hangs straight down, because it's not the kind that you put around your wrist. It's not. It was just a straight string that hung down. How is she grabbing a lanyard with the key and grabbing her dry bag? And why would you be doing that when you're instantly bouncing out in a split second? So all of that was like, you're full of it. That did not happen. That is like impossible. But that's what he said. Right? So spidey senses were up everywhere. And he said a couple different things to a couple different people. Last I saw her, she's swimming towards soulmate. Last I saw her, she's swimming towards shore. I didn't see her. I didn't hear her. I called out to her and I could hear her, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. So lots of differing accounts to differing people.
Containing the dinghy's spare key and both of their passports right as she went overboard. Ask yourself, who packs 2 passports for an afternoon of drinking at a beachside bar? Liveaboard sailors typically keep important travel documents secured on the boat. Not in a dry bag they casually carry ashore.
Something else he mentioned that was weird. He said inside the dry bag was the spare key to the dinghy and both of their passports. What? When you're a liveaboard, that's your home, right? How many times do you just pack your 2 passports to go out to the bar or drinking all day? You don't. You have a safe location in your boat, usually a safe or something like that, because there are pirates, there are people who rob people on board boats, but they locked their boat, right? Because he was jigging with he had to get the spare key out of the air conditioner and then unlock it to go down with the police officer. Remember that little detail? So what about the passports? Really, Brian? Once again, you think you're so smart. But we're all wondering, well, why'd you even bother with that story? Why would you even bother? with the passport story. And I am wondering if the passport story was necessary because Lynette's passport may have been gone. And Brian would need an explanation for that. He would need to explain why his missing wife also had a missing passport and yet he had his. And why do I think that? It's just a theory. I don't know this to be true. It's a theory. On March 11th, Lynette had told her mom, I'm leaving him for good. And her mom said, get a ticket. And she did. She bought that ticket. And she did not fly. And the next day, she said, I'm working it out. I think he took her passport. And I think he got rid of it so she couldn't. I think he took her passport, he got rid of it so she could not fly on that March 11th ticket.
And that dry bag, bright green, buoyant by design, never recovered. Neither was the second oar he claims he lost, nor the life vests that sat untouched in the bottom of the dinghy, the whole time he says he was drifting helplessly. If you noticed that detail about the life jackets before I said it out loud, you were paying closer attention than the people who first heard his story. Then there's the timeline. Brian said they left the bar around 7:30 p.m. But a photograph places him walking toward the dinghy alone around 700. A full half hour earlier, and without Lynette in frame, investigators reportedly clocked the actual boat ride at roughly 16 minutes. So where was he in that gap? And where was she? Here's where the story gets worse for him, not better. Multiple accounts attributed to Brian describe Lynette differently to different people. Swimming toward the boat, swimming toward shore, calling out but unintelligible. Inconsistent accounts among different witnesses are allegedly one of the oldest red flags in any missing persons case. And Lynette was described by people who knew her as a strong swimmer, capable of covering far more distance than the distance separating the dinghy from shore that night, in water reportedly only a couple of feet deep in the area he described. Now for the detail that should stop you cold. Reporting on this case has repeatedly pointed to electronic device data, location and motion data from phones and a smartwatch, that allegedly contradicts Brian's account. He says the dinghy drifted with the wind for 9 hours, rudderless. But if the electronic data shows movement inconsistent with Brian's claim that the dinghy simply drifted for 9 hours, that raises a serious question. Was the boat really drifting at all?
Yes, well, so some of the electronic evidence is even outside the boat. It has him going, like, the wind is blowing one direction. I mean, rarely does the wind blow in a zigzag, right? But he said, I blew all the way to Marsh Harbor, and yet there's a sharp left turn down the coast of Lubbers and then another sharp right turn back towards, Marsh Harbor. So the electronic evidence really does show a full bullshit pattern. It wasn't wind. There was probably propulsion, and there was probably a key that he eventually got rid of, allegedly. Yeah. To my knowledge, though, Nima, there's more than just electronic evidence.
Well, that's even better. Obviously, look, from the electronic evidence, I'll address that. He's saying that, he lost the key, or Lynette lost the key when she fell in, right? There's no motor. He had to sort of drift and paddle. He kept paddling. Obviously, if his electronic devices show a completely different pattern.
And then there's the smartwatch. Lynette's family says she often removed hers once back on the boat, letting it charge in the evening. Bahamian authorities reportedly recovered a watch aboard the couple's sailboat, raising the question of whether she made it back to that boat at all.
So she would often take it off as soon as she got to the boat and put it on the charger sometime around dinner, like 7-ish. So fascinating, because the Bahamian authorities...
That night, well after the time Brian claims she vanished into the sea. If Lynette had actually made it back aboard Soulmate, as some investigators and commentators have suggested, it would directly contradict Brian's account of what happened. Add to that a chilling detail from earlier, that Spring Lynette had reportedly told her mother she was leaving Brian for good and had booked a flight. That flight was never used. Ask yourself what significance a missing passport could have when a woman had already made plans to leave.
So the way federal prosecutors work is they typically handle proactive cases as opposed to reactive cases, and I'll explain the difference. So state prosecutors, someone's been arrested, The police prepare their report, the detective drops it on the DA's desk, and they're reacting to a crime that's already been committed and someone that's been arrested. Now, that certainly happened here, allegedly, of course, but federal prosecutors are used to usually handling proactive investigations. So they're sending undercovers into the mob, street kings, drug cartels, and because of their OCD nature and the fact that they have far fewer files, they tend to not go to the grand jury and get an indictment until the case is bulletproof. Actually, I'm talking I's dotted, T's crossed. So I know it's frustrating for people that are watching. They think that no news is really bad news, but that doesn't mean the investigation isn't going on behind the scenes. And when they drop the hammer and they go get that indictment and arrest warrant and they pick someone up, the case is locked and loaded. So I think that's what's happening here behind the scenes. Obviously, we don't know what we don't know, but that's my expectation and my experience handling these types of cases.
And I love that you say locked and loaded, because the way it's been explained to me before is that they could go to trial like in 2 months. Is that hyperbole?
Well, if the defense doesn't waive time, certainly the defendant has a right to a speedy trial. And it's rare. It happens once in a while. You got to be prepared. You have to have all your witnesses. Obviously, look, and we're going to go through the evidence. This is a circumstantial case. You want to make sure that you don't have any problems, because if you're a prosecutor, especially a federal prosecutor, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ashley, you're expected to win every case. Even a hung jury is a loss. I never lost a case as a Fed because my agents were fantastic. But also, by the time we arrested someone, we were good to go. We could try the case the next day.
And so is it, I always waffle on the success rate, but is it 95% success rate when it's Fed?
Yeah, it's well over 95%. I mean, certainly, obviously, if you count guilty pleas, it's, 98, 99%. But cases that actually go to trial, it is over 95% conviction rate in federal court.
So that's the thing that I'm hoping will get everybody off the ledge, is that be patient, wait for it, because it's worth the wait.
None of this proves guilt. I want to be clear about that. None of this is a conviction, and Brian Hooker has not been charged with anything. Investigators haven't shown their full hand, and under our system, he is entitled to the presumption of innocence unless and until proven otherwise in a courtroom. But federal prosecutors generally build much more of their case before filing charges. That silence you've been frustrated by isn't necessarily inaction. It can be preparation. I keep coming back to one image from this case. Not the dinghy, not the dry bag, none of the physical evidence. It's a photograph taken poolside days before she disappeared. Lynette is on one side, dancing by herself, caught mid-laugh in a turquoise cover, up over her swimsuit. Brian is on the far side, alone, allegedly scowling out at the ocean. Whatever was happening in that marriage, she was still finding moments to dance.
The witnesses who took that picture noticed their bizarre behavior. She was apparently dancing by herself on the left-hand side of the pool while he was scowling at the ocean on the right-hand side of the pool. And she's taking this selfie, and what you can really see is this light wristband of an Apple Watch. And her daughter said that she wore the Apple Watch, but the battery was bad, so she would often take it off as soon as she got to the boat and put it on the charger sometime around dinner, like 7ish. So fascinating, because the Bahamian authorities found an Apple Watch on board the boat. There's been some discrepancy that there may be 2 Apple Watches. She may have had a spare. It's very curious as to where the Apple Watch would be that was on her wrist in that last selfie. Was it the one that they seized, or was there a spare? Yet to be determined, but a fascinating moment of discussion within this whole disappearance.
So here's what I want to know from you. Knowing what you now know about that flat, calm water, does any part of Brian Hooker's story hold up for you? Tell me in the comments, and stay close, because next time I'm going deeper into the passport theory and why those missing documents may be one of the most intriguing details in this case. If you want to see where this case goes next, subscribe to the channel. And if this story caught your attention, hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Do you believe Brian Hooker's story holds up?